might have. Okay, we're very happy today to have Garretson with us for our data-driven seminars here. And like I say, I've known Drew for quite some time. He's with Keystone Cooperative, and looking at the Crop Life Top 100, I looked recently, and you're in the top 10 of guide retailers in the U.S. So very, very impressed by that. And you are the VP of Member Engagement, and I see you started, your career started here at Purdue as an ag education student with agronomy. And then you went on to Land Lakes and Surrey Solutions, and you live at Vincennes currently, right? And so also just stepped down as the president of the Ag Alumni Association. So anyway, welcome, Drew, and we're glad to have you here.
Thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate that. I'm excited to be here today, and I'm thanks for all the support. There's a lot of familiar faces in the room. I told my wife that Dr. Ackridge sent me an email yesterday. He was going to try to swing by. And I mean, think about the hours I've listened to Dr. Ackridge talking. Now the roles are reversed. That's kind of nerve-wracking. But I'm excited to really talk about what the future of agriculture can look like. And this is something that I have had the opportunity to speak on a few different times. Right before COVID, actually. So in February of 2020, I got asked to go to a conference over in Ohio, and there's about 400 or 500 farmers in the room. And this is the topic they asked me to talk about. They said, help us understand what farming is going to look like in 2040. And so that's exciting to me to think about what are the forces that are happening right now from an industry perspective that lead us to like have at least a little bit of a crystal ball. So the things I'm going to talk about today are going to be super high level. We can dive into like details into what those factors and forces are. I'm going to share a little data about our farmer-owned co-op and some of the trends that we're seeing within the walls of Keystone Cooperative. And then I have kind of some pro tips at the end. One of the things I've always had, it seems like every semester I get the opportunity to guest lecture in some form or fashion. And I always try to wrap it up with like, if I were in your shoes and I was a student or a student sitting in your seat, what would I want somebody coming back to campus to tell me? So I have these pro tips for life at the end. So it has nothing to do with ag and biological engineering or data or digital or anything, just pro life tips. At Keystone Cooperative, our mission is to lead, serve, grow, and embrace. And just to give you a little bit of a little bit of flavor of who we are. We are a farmer-owned co-op, meaning our business model is that this organization is owned by farmers. They own stock in this company. You cannot buy stock of Keystone Cooperative on the NASDAQ. Like we do not exist. You can buy Wall Street. So that's I would say that's a differentiator for us. We tend to say that we report to Main Street, not Wall Street. So the profits of this company go back to the 20,000 farmers that own Keystone. So the way to think about this really simply is like we clip a little bit of margin off of the products that we sell. We take part of that and we hire good people. The next part of that is we have assets that help serve our farmer owners, and the rest of the profits of the organization we give back to the people who own it through the form of patronage. This is our footprint. I think we're the second largest private employer in the state of Indiana, right at 2,000 employees. The number that I was talking about earlier, we are owned by 20,000 farmer owners. And that is, I would call that to be the humble factor. When I wake up every day, I'm not trying to, I'm here to serve those farmers. And that means a lot to me from a value perspective. And so when you're waking up to serve farmers, we are governed by a board of directors that are all farmers as well. And it's certainly an important part of who we are. Keystone as a brand is fairly new to the market, a little over 2 years old, but we are a conglomeration and a result of many mergers over the period of the last probably 30 years. But this is a 100-year-old farmer-owned co-op. So it is the legacy of this organization goes back a long way. This is what I was talking about. That's the extra that's left over after we invest in our people and invest in assets last year to the tune of about $60 million that was given back to our owners. All right, so let's start to dig into what are some of I call the forces that I believe are starting to transform the future of ag. And we'll talk through each one of these, and a couple of these I have a little more data and detail on that I'll share. First is farm consolidation. Our farmer owners and members are getting more sophisticated every single day, and they're getting bigger. That we will have less members 10 years from now. So if we don't grow in size, our top line sales will grow, I promise you, but our total farmer owners will probably decline by probably 10 to 15% based off of the trends that we're on right now. This is happening for many reasons, mainly due to the price, the margin squeeze that is on farmers currently, and that drives consolidation, right? When you need to be more operationally efficient, it's better for you to spread that over multiple acres. Dr. Gray. The next is data native operations. One of the things we were talking about this morning actually is that one of the trends that we're seeing internally and externally as it relates to data, our data native operations, is our farmers of the future and even some of our employees within Keystone are looking at data as at a level of trust that we've never seen before. So 5 years ago, if we gave somebody a data set and they made a recommendation, so you should do this, you should buy this, you should sell this, they'd be like, I've been here for 40 years. I'm not sure. I know better than the data knows whether or not I should do this or not. Thank you for the recommendation. I'd say that the change that we're seeing right now is this trust in data is starting to, and I think this is like that generation turn that's starting to happen. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but at the farm level and internally, our farmers are becoming more and more trusting of the data is right. They don't even question it as much anymore as what they used to. And we're definitely seeing that internally, that when we have a data set that helps us drive decision-making and procurement, we don't spend a lot of time arguing about if it's right or not. We just trust that the data is correct. Next, biotech. A lot of you folks in this room probably understand this even better than I do, but I think we're going to go through in the next 10 to 15 years what I would consider a very substantial revolution in biotechnology. This, the ability to apply the CRISPR type of technology to genetics will help us solve for some of the challenges that we have at the field level. And I think this will be a major component of that. Think about things like drought tolerance, nitrogen efficiencies, things like growing crops in regions that maybe we wouldn't have been able to grow them before because of the ability to, the advanced ability to bring those things to market through this biotech revolution. I think the other thing that we're seeing is this transition that growth in an operation, and I'm thinking about a farm operation, is really directly proportional to the amount of water that we have. I'd say that we probably don't feel that as much in the Eastern Corn Belt because we're probably trying to manage water quite a bit differently, trying to figure out how to get it off of the ground. But in the future, as it relates to growing a safe and affordable food supply chain, this becomes a really critical factor moving forward. And the places in which we are able to get growth from an agriculture perspective will be in places where we have abundant and affordable water supply. Next is connected consumers. As the millennial generation is now the largest generation of purchasers of food, their habits, we've been hearing this for a long time, their purchasing habits as related to food are a lot different. They're interested in knowing where their food came from. I was talking to Dr. Trey Malone this morning about the impact of GLP-1s on the consumer base, and he said 800 calories. Does that sound right, Alan? 800 calorie, like basically deficit, if you want to look at it that way. They want 800 calories less. Well, that has substantial impacts when you start to think about scaling GLP-1s. And I think that, along with just a desire by the consumer to have clear transparency to the food supply chain, will drive some changes. I hope it's changes for the better. This could actually be some structural change here. We saw that in animal ag in the 90s, where we because of margins, we vertically integrated that business model, and we basically the food company Tyson, for example, would own the hog all the way through and just pay the farmer to do it. That has potential to happen in the row crop business as well, because of connected consumers and margin pressure at the farm gate. I think that's one to kind of watch. Food security is national security. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but ultimately, I would call, with the volatility that exists inside of the world today, this is our competitive advantage in the world. We have the safest and most affordable food supply chain, and I think this is something that we cannot take for granted, and gives us a competitive advantage in the market. We have to figure out how to. I think this becomes more important as we move forward in the next 10 years. Not exactly sure what that means, but I do believe that this matters in 2035. And then we'll actually show you some data on this one, but we're also going to, in the next, between now and 2040, we're going to go through the largest land and wealth transition to ever happen in modern times. The transition of wealth from the baby boomers, maybe even the generation before that, to the millennial generation is going to happen in that time frame, and it's massive in terms of what its implications could be. And then how do we the possibility of having more and more absentee landowners from a farmer's perspective is going to be more real. And I'll do a little bit of projecting of what I think that means to Keystone and what our farmers look like. This is just here's what you need to know about this data. This is less farms, but the farms that are out there are getting bigger. It's basically what we're saying. This is over a 20-year term of the declining number of farms from a millions perspective, and this shows their acre growth up 5% just in a 5-year time frame. And I'll show you some Keystone data that lines up exactly what it actually shows you, that we're consolidating even faster than the USDA data. And we see this in terms of, like, I think it's probably right now 60% or 70% of the business, a farmer-owned business at Keystone, is done by the top, say, 200 to 300. Our projections say that it's probably going to be like a 90-10 ratio here in about 10 years, if we stay on the same trajectory. This is an article I found really interesting. Now, this wasn't just about ag; it actually encompassed all of the asset that would be income-generating properties. But there's going to be an estimated $70 trillion shift from that wealth transition from those generations to the current generation, and that's significant, and that's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. We'll talk about maybe a little bit more of this later. So let's kind of dive into some more Keystone-facing perspective here and kind of what this means. When we think about technology, innovation, and how we continue to stay up to speed with what's happening as it relates to that, is really three things that are happening. One is our farmer owners continue to get more sophisticated, and it's really important for us to stay ahead of our most progressive farmer. And that gets harder and harder to do because of the speed of consolidation. But it's our commitment to the system that we continue to challenge them. And a lot of times, you're getting behind when they're challenging and pushing you. So it's time for a change. I think we're actually at a spot right now that I feel really good about where we are, but give it 24 months and we're going to be, I think, maybe behind in a couple spots. It's also really important that we have the ability to attract and recruit talent to this organization that can help us move into the future. And we will see by 2030 that 2/3 of our workforce will be digital natives. Like right now, it's probably I would say 60% that what I call digital immigrants. People like me who didn't grow up with the technology, but I had to figure out how to use it in my professional career. You fast forward the clock 4 years, and 2/3 of our organization are going to be born what I call after the year 1990. Right? They understand how to use technology, and there's just the expectation that you have the tools to help them be successful. And listen, we all know that technology is ramping up at a high rate, and we've got to continue to understand how to stay ahead of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. All right, so I did a little bit of AI work here to try to simulate what I think our farmer member of the future is going to look like. And I even asked the AI agent to make these pictures, which it did okay. But let's talk about 15 years ago. At Keystone, if I look at all the legacy companies, that would have been that would have been 6 organizations 15 years ago that were one today. But we would have 25,000 members spread over 3 states, obviously dominated by males. The average age of that group would have been 57. And I find one of the most interesting things I find is what were those behaviors of those types of what were their buying behaviors? How did they act? They prefer to do business in person, have a handshake. They want to see you. They want to trust you. These people were super dedicated. They were very motivated, and they kind of just they really wanted to be what I would consider to be very successful. Fast forward the clock 15 years. This is I had to simulate the data. It's not exactly perfect, but it's very close. We have 20,000 members today. Most of those are over in the state of Indiana. That's just based off of our footprint. We have a few more females than we did before, but still dominated by the males. Our average age has actually gone up, where the average age of our members today is at age 60, which that would be in the what we call Gen X's. Their key behaviors as Gen X's are they're focused on efficiencies. If you go ask our farmer members what they want and how they want to do business, they want to be more efficient. I'm even okay with quick, short communication. It doesn't mean I don't like you. That means I just want to go. We got to go. Operational excellence, and we're focused on results. But then we start to project out the next, what we believe the behaviors are of the future member. We believe that this is just by trend. We'll say that we go from 20,000 members today to 12,000. That's quite a decrease. We also see that not only do we have members inside of 3 states, we also have a lot of what I'm going to call farmers that are farming across multiple states at that point. And just for fun, I put in there the fact that we probably have members in New York, Illinois, California, Iowa. That could be real. Today, we pretty much are centered in one state. I believe there'll be a day in which we are having to deal with across multiple state lines. I think we go to a more split on the male-female piece. The average age goes back closer to where we were in 2010 at age 55. And then you got to think this is probably the most important piece of that is what are those key behaviors that that generation has. They default to digital first. That's how they want to do business. They'd rather text than call, right? They would rather send an email. They'd rather order through the app than call in or send an email. They tend to be a little more collaborative, which is kind of interesting because when we go ask our farmers about farming in 2040, that's what they say. I can see me working with 5 other farmers to have one farm. And which is kind of like how a co-op works, to be honest with you. That's the reason that it is designed in the first place. And it aligns with values. It's not all we tend to think it's all about price all the time, but this generation cares a lot more about the idea of aligning from a values perspective than what we give them credit for. I think this is one of the reasons why I think the sustainability and regenerative ag thing works with this generation is because that tends to be a value alignment piece, and they tend to be pretty open-minded to figuring those things out. All right, so here's this is some interesting data. A couple of, from 2022 to 2024, we pulled together a project team called Project 2040. I led it. It was a group of 12 farmers across Indiana and Michigan. The average age was 35 years old. The average farm size was 7,000 acres. And these people were what I would consider to be very progressive farmers. And we had them kind of scattered. We had 2 per district in our at Keystone. We asked them to go back and ask their father how many acres they were, how many acres they were farming when they came back. So they graduated from Purdue, they came back to the farm. I want to know how many acres you were farming, and that's what this was. Not how many acres you're farming right now, how many acres you were farming when you first started. And then I want you to go ask Dad, how many acres were you farming when your dad came back and started farming with your grandpa? Okay, and that's what this number was here. So basically, your dad's giving you your dad is giving you the same opportunity that your dad gave your grandpa. And in order for you to give your kid the same opportunity that your dad gave to you and your grandpa gave to your dad, this is what the trend would show in terms of the number of acres that you would need to be farming. And I can tell you that that group they were kind of blown away when we started to say this could be the size of your operation if you're just staying on trend with the data. And you saw them grow from 40,000 to 140,000 just to give them the same opportunity. And that was just doing the math. The other thing that was really interesting was livestock ownership. Almost all of these guys in 2 generations ago, they had some level of livestock on the farm. In that group of 12, there was like 3, and the projection would be that there would be 1 that would actually be in livestock. Now, I actually see this trend changing, and I think this is one of the pieces of information I thought has been found really interesting lately is we've seen a surge in interest in animal ag. It's been profitable the last couple of years as it relates to row crops, but we have seen farmers who have the capital to be able to make an investment in animal agriculture actually come and ask if they can figure out how to get into animal ag. These are people that have been row cropping for at least 2 generations that are interested in putting up like hog buildings, for example. It's an interesting trend that we'll see where that all shakes out. This piece here is just like showing you that, listen, we know technology is changing. I think at the beginning of 2025, I heard someone say that you'll see AI advancements by quarter be more than what AI advancement has been in the last 5 years combined. We'll see those things happen. And I would say that's absolutely the case. And agriculture is always one of the last industries to figure out how to adopt these things. So I guess the moral of the story is we don't see any path that leads to less farmers in the future, but we'll have less farmers in the future that are growing more in size and scale. I thought this would be interesting for this group. So we asked a group of 125 farmers here recently about technology specifically in a survey that we did. This was some of the data that I went over with Dr. Malone this morning. But what technologies or practices would most value or improve your productivity and profitability of your farm? Number one and number 2 are relevant, and I think for this audience, which is data analytics and digital farm management software. I feel like, Bruce, they've been saying this for 10 or 15 years, and we still haven't figured out the tool that is going to help make their life easier. And that combine that with the desire to figure out how to precision. I am comfortable using precision ag on my farm. Now I need to figure out how to take it to the next level. This feels like how I can quickly be able to get to an ROI, maybe help manage my risk. We have not found the solution. It doesn't feel like as an industry to get us all the way there. My favorite topic is automation and robotics. Unfortunately, that fell in last in terms of what the farmers are saying right now. I thought this was this was the insight that AI created. Decision support and data tools are in favor over capital-intensive automation solutions. So basically, farmers are saying, like, I like driving tractors. Like, don't take that away from me, right? I just enjoy that part of my job. Although I tend to be a little more bullish on that one than they are, I think what you're saying here is I think farmers are saying I have pain as it relates to the data that's generated on my operation. I haven't figured out how to make it work exactly. And I could use some help there because I don't like dealing with this anyway. I like doing this. So, all right. So as we start to kind of work towards the kind of the summary of this, and then we'll open up for some questions. My crystal ball of what I see happening is I try to make this as simple as I possibly could. We today, and I would say in my career, I have been graduated from Purdue 21 years. That's unbelievable now. But I would say that it's always been the more you put into something, the more you get out. Like the better job that I do of fertilizing, managing, and typically the more it is up to a point, I get more out at the end. I believe based off of the technologies that are going to be coming to the market, paired with this biotech revolution that we're going to have, plus I'm going to call it the automation, computer vision, those types of things. The tomorrow in 2040 vision looks like the system optimization under constraints. Like you are going to be given so much nitrogen for your operation, you got to figure out how to optimize that. That could be a policy-driven thing, but we will have technology and computer vision and automation that will allow us to operate successfully under this piece right here. So I think the trend that we think about a lot is how do we help our farmers and how do we stay relevant as a business when actually the inputs is what we make money on. I told you that's right. We clip a little margin on the products that we sell, and then but if we don't sell as many products, how do we manage through that? And I would call services feels like the way that we've got to figure out how to help farmers through this thing, and that's what I told Dr. Buckmaster is starting in January. I actually started a new role. I left innovation in ag tech for the first time. Maybe that's just given when you get over 20 years, you're like, okay, you can't be the tech guy anymore, right? There's no way you can stay up with what's going on. But they wanted me to build a new business within the walls of Keystone, and that'll be our services business. So spending a lot of time right now trying to build that strategy and what we need to be doing. But because of that, I feel like it's super important. So my simple brain saying we're going to sell less, and we're still going to grow more in the future because of these things. All right, so what are my top three? You should not go invest off of my recommendations. I can't tell you that I have, and I don't know. We'll see how that plays out or not. But these are what I call three things that I'm very bullish on, and I call the technologies to watch. One is what I call real-time, this is very specific, real-time soil intelligence. So there's I won't mention the name, but there is a technology out there that came off of basically the Mars rover mission, where we sent the rover to Mars, and then the technology that used to analyze the soil or the surface of Mars is now getting scaled at a field level. And the technology seems to be really promising, and it seems to work from my perspective. And I'm not an academic, but the little bit of analysis that I've done on this feels like a complete game changer from an industry perspective. If we can go through a field and apply the appropriate amount of nutrition to the crop based off of what's happening right now. We've been saying that for a long time with sensors, but quite honestly, they're more reactive in nature, and we haven't been able to figure out how to scale them. What this technology feels like it could scale. Second, I'm very bullish on computer vision paired with hard tech to help solve the labor thing. So although farmers say they like driving tractors and they don't want robots, I think that eventually they will. So I could vision a day in 2040 in which some of the jobs that are kind of repetitive in nature at a farm are actually done by a series of robots. We're working on a project. I live in Southwest Indiana. We're the #2 watermelon producing county in the United States. We have a founder of a company that is working on automating and the watermelon harvesting process. So we bring in 5,000 H2A workers into our county every summer to harvest this crop. It is by far the largest pain point for the local farmer and the largest amount of cost to the farmer. And this guy's built a prototype that allows him to use an off-the-shelf NVIDIA sensor to identify a ripe watermelon, deploy a robotic arm to the melon, pick it up, and then sort it by grade and size, and then package it all in one pass through the field. So I tend to be pretty bullish on the fact that we can use computer vision, and like this is at 2 miles an hour or something, but we know that we can do this at 15 miles an hour today and identify a pest or a weed and take action on it. I believe that those types of things will continue to solve the labor problem going forward, and it probably allows us to get to that more diversity that the farmers are asking for. I need additional revenue streams on my farm. I want to diversify my operation, but I also don't want to, manually move chicken huts. But if I can have a robotic one do it for me, maybe I'm more interested in doing that. And then I talked a little bit about the gene editing thing. One of the companies I think is fascinating is Ohalo. It's a startup company. Actually, the guy who's the founder of that company was also the guy who founded Climate, that was like one of 2 major exits in ag tech, which was when Monsanto bought Climate for $1 billion in 2014. This guy's was the founder of Climate. He's the founder of Ohalo. They've got a gene editing solution that they're starting with the potatoes, but I'm pretty bullish on the speed in which we can solve problems as it relates to using bioengineering to help to solve those things. Those are kind of the 3 that I would say that I'm very bullish on from a tech perspective. Okay, now we'll wrap it up with Drew's pro tips. So if I were sitting here, if I were a student, what would I want somebody to tell me? This is great. You told me all this technology. I already know a lot about all this stuff. What are the pro tips? So one, these are some of the ones I've lived by, right? My default answer to most things is yes, as long as it doesn't harm someone else. And somebody calls me and asks me to record a video, I'm going to say yes. Thank you. Yeah. So, but we were talking today about when somebody asks me to do things. My default answer is most of the time yes. Like I don't like, and that's probably a fault of mine to some degree. But I also think you're being asked those things for a reason. That opportunity is coming to you for a reason. As long as it's not harmful to someone else, you should probably figure out how to say yes to that. Second, solve real problems. Dr. Gray said, what are the jobs to be done? You better figure out what the jobs are first. But solving real problems is really, really important. Today, I presented my 60 minutes with Trey. He's like, Drew, this is great. You have a bunch of initiatives here. You haven't solved a single problem. That was great coaching and feedback to me. I go back and figure out where the problems are. But if you're going to be in this space, farmers will sniff this out really, really fast. If you're just, and I actually have been a little grumpy with ag tech as it relates to this. There's a lot of solutions coming to the market that are looking for problems and not actually solving real ones. And I've probably been kicked off some Christmas card lists over the years by saying that, but you need to solve real problems. Don't just take something that works maybe in some other industry and try to apply it to ag. Hire a personal board of directors. 4 or 5 people that when I'm looking to make a decision, whether it's a personal decision, professional decision, there's a few people that I always call. I always get coffee with, have a beer with. I adopted this like probably 4 or 5 years ago. Who are those people? And they have to make you better. And I walked in there today. I was really hoping Trey would be super excited about what I was doing, but what he said is like, it's not good enough. And I needed that. My dad says, your ass needs humble every once in a while. That's what he would say. Find your personal board of directors that are good, are okay telling you some of your ideas are bad. That's what you need. Hire people smarter than you and pay them more money. My uncle was a very successful businessman. I feel like everybody's got an uncle that was super successful. And I asked him this question one time, and this is what he said. And so when I was working for Land O'Lakes, I had the opportunity to go hire 30 people. And this is I would call my guiding North Star was try to hire people that I know are better and smarter than me. And then I'm not afraid to pay them more money if that's what it takes to get them here. And I've seen that pay off multiple times. And then the last one is invest yourself into your community, whatever your community is. Purdue is part of my community. I invest time and effort with Purdue. I invest a lot of time and effort with my local community in many ways, but I feel like you're here to do good. By human nature, I think we're defaulted to do good. Find ways to get involved and invest yourself into your community. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my email address if you have questions. Fun pictures of 2 weeks ago, maybe it's 3 weeks ago tomorrow. There was the celebration of agriculture on the south lawn of the White House. I had the unbelievable opportunity to take my family to that, and I hosted 10 other farmers that came with us that day. Really cool opportunity. Saw a lot of actually several Purdue folks. You can always count on them to show up at things like this, but really cool. But that's my guiding North Star. That's my son Avery, my daughter Taylor Ann, and my wife Tiffany. All right.